How come some places seem to attract people to the area? Is it natural beauty or something else? Some places seem to pulse with an unseen rhythm that attracts people and makes them want to stay. One of these places is the small Victorian town of Port Townsend. It has attracted people to its locations for thousands of years. It was the site of one of the first European settlements in the area, and before that, indigenous people had villages in the area and considered the surrounding land sacred for thousands of years. But what if I told you that at one point, the military may have been looking into weaponizing the spiritual and natural powers of the land? There's evidence that the government and other secret societies used and are still using ceremonies and man-made monoliths for potentially nefarious means. If you like what you hear, you may like my other stories. I've collected local lore, history, and first-hand encounters into an anthology series called Northwest Mythologies. 2 volumes are currently available to buy on my website. While you're there, make sure you take a look around. It has a place where you can stay up to date with what I have coming up, and a map to report your own encounters in strange places. I always have new things I'm working on, so make sure you check it out often. And while you're here watching this video, please make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. And while you're at it, turn on the notifications so you can stay up to date when new videos drop. I'm trying to upload new videos of the strange, supernatural, and cryptids weekly. I have 2 books of stories I want to share and get through, and I'm always researching and investigating more to fill future volumes of books. I call this tale Warden Witchcraft. Fort Warden is a sprawling fort located by the city of Port Townsend. Port Townsend is a fascinating Victorian city. The town itself has one of the most haunted houses and other buildings per capita than almost any other location in the world. Several ghost tours are available to take you into these haunted locations, many of which are over 100 years old. A series of haunted tunnels also runs under most of downtown, with tours opening periodically. Many of these tunnels were used to Shanghai drunk people. Shanghaiing was a practice where bars would have a trap door that they would spring with a lever on unsuspecting patrons. Once through the trap door, the victims would be jumped and beat up by a group of men with clubs or fists, and when they woke up, they'd be out to sea, frequently headed towards the city of Shanghai, hence where the name came from. These tunnels were also used for smuggling and prostitution. Several murders were known to have taken place in these tunnels. There are many ways down into the tunnels. Most of them are well known for being extremely haunted. And if that wasn't strange enough, just outside the town is a sprawling, abandoned military base named Fort Warden. And it has a mysterious past with its own set of tunnels that may hide its own secrets. This base is listed at 433 acres, but is much larger with all the surrounding abandoned support structures. You can walk for several miles and still not have visited all of these locations. This is a strange base because it was built in the mid-1800s and was never used in combat. It was set up to protect the naval shipyard in Bremerton from possible attack. The government was supposedly worried that the British, that was supposedly our allies, would attack from Canada. A stroll around the massive complex immediately raises questions about this official story. Instead of one base, there are several. On the beach is the start of the fortifications, and there are several massive forts with dark labyrinths that can be explored. Up the hill is the most significant part, with several acres of interconnected pitch-black tunnels. On the other side of the hill are massive bunkers that used to house gigantic gun batteries. And finally, multiple random bunkers are spread throughout the rest of the sprawling park. The overall layout does not make for a very defensible position. Several portions of the base would be able to be isolated and quickly overrun. Also, if an attack occurred over land and not from the ocean, the base would have little to no defenses against that. The fact that such a massive building exists to defend against the British, who were our allies, just immediately raises red flags about that official use. The first bizarre thing about the base is that the tunnels, not accessible to the general public, are said to run throughout the whole area. Sometimes tours are offered to a few of these tunnels, but the deepest ones are always off limits. The remnants of the secret tunnels that are off limits can be seen through grates that are welded shut in the deeper parts of these tour tunnels. When a flashlight is shined down through the grates, it reveals a metal rung ladder that descends into the darkness, all the way to the end of the flashlight. How deep the ladders go down is not something that's released to the general public, nor where those secret tunnels lead. But judging by the depth that the flashlight reaches, it's several hundred feet down. Also, large metal doors will be welded shut at the end of long slopes. And it's a massive complex is said to run throughout the whole area. And even tunnels leading to those Shanghai tunnels in the nearby town of Port Townsend. And rumors say these tunnels extended several miles all the way to Fort Townsend, miles outside of town, and maybe even to Fort Flagler across the bay. They would go under the water across the bay. So the only way to access these tunnels now is by moving boulders that they have placed on some of these shafts. With a few friends, a stone could be moved. Teenagers are said to occasionally access these deeper tunnels this way, but sadly, several times a year, their teenagers and other people are reported missing. And missing people are widespread in the whole area. And the last known location is often around that base. Now, some unofficial local lore of the area talks about an even darker and more sinister history of the fort, with demonic entities for modern day use. And it was said that it was built on a Neolithic Stonehenge type site that ancient people would gather and worship for thousands of years and perform various rituals and possibly sacrifices. And the tunnels that are the deepest in the fort are said to connect into natural caverns and go even deeper. And that the military was trying to harness some of the supernatural nexus of power and turn it into some kind of weapon by summoning supernatural beings to attack their enemies or do espionage. And this nexus of power was said to be able to summon these beings from other realms. And this is why the local town has such a high amount of hauntings, and why that was a sacred site for thousands of years. And there's still a high proportion of psychics and spiritual people that are still drawn to the area by this unseen energy resonating through the earth's bowels. Some of the seeming randomly massive military structures were actually replacements and enhancements for pre-existing standing stone monoliths. They were enhanced to be on a much larger scale with the hope of strengthening their power. The exact nature and success of these experiments cannot be known. Secret experiments were held at these sites for over 50 years. The area is riddled with sightings of ghosts, shadow people, and even darker creatures that can be seen lurking in the old fort's darker recesses. The sightings of shadow people in the area goes back as long as there have been written records in the area. I recently just read an account from the 1800s of people reporting shadow figures haunting the nearby Red Man Cemetery, just right down the road. Whatever success the occultist branch of the military had, it wasn't enough to maintain the massive amount of funding needed to keep the fort operational, and it eventually shut down. I know for most people, shadow people and ghosts would appear to be the same type of creatures. However, a significant distinction is that shadow people were never human. Lots of speculation goes into what they actually are. In our physical realm, they show up as roughly humanoid-shaped shadows that are not attached to anything. Sometimes a light source might not even be present to be casting a shadow. They can appear as a darker shadow within shadows. Other times it'll look like a shadow moving by itself, where there's no light. The shadow people can interact with objects and people, although they don't seem to be able to cause substantial damage to humans. Legends tell of them being able to scratch or shove people. Occasionally they might be able to move an object about 20 pounds in weight. They're also said to talk to people in a whispered language. But it's hard to know what that language is. It's hard to understand it. But apparently they can be persuasive. The shadow people are said to talk weak-minded people into doing their bidding by hurting themselves or others. Two common hypotheses exist as to what these shadow people are. First, people think they might be demons. Lots of evidence supports this, including the Bible describing demons as shadows. If this is the case, they might be able to possess a human host, either willingly or not. The Bible also says that they can easily possess different types of animals. This is horrifying, and why I hope the second hypothesis is the accurate one. The second hypothesis is that shadow people are beings from different dimensions. They show up as shadows in our 3D plane of existence, while their main body is actually on a higher plane, the fourth dimension, fifth dimension. This is a complex theory to think about. I like to think of a line on a piece of paper in a 3D shape. The line wouldn't know that a cube is actually drawn 3D. And to the cube, it just appears as a strange line. That same concept is what shadow people might be. Some higher being aware it is in our plane, but we can only grasp its true form as a shadow. They may not be evil, but they have a nature that we find strange, and often their actions we take as evil. Think of a young child messing with an ant colony. The ants don't understand what's going on, and the child's only looking to have a little fun. The shadow beings might be doing something similar when they interact with us. The most dangerous creatures are said to be secured in the deepest inaccessible areas of the fort. The less corporeal beings are said to occasionally be able to escape and wander the grounds of the fort, while those more dangerous beings are trapped down deep where nobody's allowed to go. And that's why the fort's off limits. And it's still used to this day by some satanic or pagan people trying to summon or communicate with these beings. While exploring the fort, I visited the gun batteries, and I came across several altars with pentagrams painted in what I hope was red spray paint. Several small altars were also present, with many multicolored candles set up with various offering bowls at the center. The groups are said to go during the witching hour and especially around the solstices. The old gun batteries themselves were said to be used as gigantic summoning circles at one point by the military. This sounds far-fetched, but in the middle of the gun batteries, a door to the deepest reaches of the fort would open up during the ceremonies at the pinnacle. They were said to slide open, and then these beasts would come from the bowels of the earth that had been summoned. And they were round, and they would paint a pentagram on there with, rumors has it, from blood from local Shanghai victims led through the town through those tunnels. Whatever the truth of these buildings in the fort, in the tunnels, the whole area, including Port Townsend itself, has an ample amount of interesting residents that say they are drawn to that area by its mystic energies. I'd love to take tours of the deeper tunnels and would like to see the whole complex open to the public for exploration. The demonic and pagan rituals are true rumors, and listeners should be cautious of interrupting things that they don't understand. I wouldn't explore that area at night. Exploring the upper levels during the day with a flashlight is enough for me. On a recent trip to the fort this summer, I gained access to a restricted area where it was accidentally left unlocked. The lock was on the door but hadn't been fully latched. It opened to several rooms going into the hill about a quarter mile. Most of the rooms stored various tools for maintenance. However, there were a few rooms that had additional secured locks. I mentioned this as this section was huge, and there was many more sections leading off I didn't get to explore because I was only in there briefly because I was worried that the worker was going to come back and secure that lock and trap me in there for who knows how long. In conclusion, I absolutely think that base had more going on than what is commonly known and released to the public. The success of the occult ceremonies and structures was probably not to the level the military thought was worth the investment. As far as current use, I'm not sure. I know through talking with locals and personal experience of finding those remnants of ceremonies and occult practices that some activity still takes place, and it might be involved with local disappearances to this day. The facts are inconclusive. Shadow beings are still a common reported occurrence throughout that Port Townsend area. If you explore the fort and town at night, I encourage you to be very careful. And if you enjoyed what you heard, make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe. As mentioned earlier, I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs. And make sure you turn on those notifications. I upload new videos of the strange and supernatural weekly right now, and I make content that can only be heard right here. I go and investigate. I write these stories. If you want to support my writing, make sure to pick up a copy of my book and visit my website, northwestmythology.com. A link will be in the description. I love these weird, strange, scary stories and look forward to sharing many more. I also often get asked why I don't go back to Port Townsend at night. I actually do go back often, and I've been working on developing a more in-depth story of the town and the area. But these stories take time and effort. I often work on several investigations at the same time, concurrently. Although I've gone back to the area about 5 times this past year to check things out, I haven't experienced anything supernatural firsthand. I tried to camp at Fort Worden, but it was all booked up all summer. It's hard to get a reservation. I'm currently trying to stay in a haunted hotel in the town. Maybe a nighttime investigation will bear some supernatural encounters, especially if timed during the solstice or equinoxes. Let me know what you think. Should I try to go back and investigate Port Townsend more, especially at night? Or would my time be better spent checking out other local areas? Leave a comment below letting me know what you think. What are shadow people? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.